Hello, it's Deborah from the attic, and today I have the latest kit from Simon Says Stamp. This is the March 2020 kit and it's called Stronger Together. The first thing you'll notice when you receive your box this month is how heavy it is, and that's because there's a lot of weighty stuff in this kit. I'm going to reserve the lollipop, that's just for me. We'll start with this die. This is a little die, it's all connected letters and it says hello. There's a craft tacky glue. This is Simon Says Stamp branded glue. I've used this before, I found it very good. It's got a nice amount of open time to allow you to move projects around if your pieces of card aren't in exactly the right place. And then when it sticks really solidly. There's a really beautiful stamp. Let me show you this more clearly. There are lots of foliage and flower elements. There's a really nice long tall piece here with some leaves on it as well and some nice sentiments. There is a box that contains 24 watercolour pencils. This is a pack of 6x6 Moda scrap papers. These are called spring flowers. Moda scrap papers are always really beautiful. Let me do a little flip through for you. I like that there is this panel at the top that shows you all of the different papers, and I often use that in projects because it's a really nice way of getting the maximum out of your kit and out of your papers. These are single-sided papers. To go with the watercolour pencils from earlier, there are these watercolouring cards. And there are 3. Of the 3 envelopes, one is this beautiful pearlised effect and the other 2 are buff. I always forget to tell you about the envelopes that they have a self-seal adhesive on the back. This is a piece of 6x6 glitter paper and it ties in really nicely with the envelope colours. To complete the kit we have 4 sheets of cardstock. For our first card I'm going to use one of the watercolour cards and I'm going to use some of the pencils. I also have this little pen here which is a sort of a watercolour pen. It's just got water in it. And the idea is that you squeeze the water down from the barrel into the brush and that will help you distribute the colour from the pencils. But of course you could always use an ordinary brush and a little tub of water. I tend to spill tubs of water, which is why I prefer the water pen. I'm adding some very light touches of blue to my flower petals here. I'll also add a light purple so that I get a nice contrast, and when I add the water you'll be able to see how easily and nicely the colour from the pencils distributes around the rest of the petal. This is a really nice relaxing thing to do. I've coloured in all of my flower including the stems, and now I'm going to cut out the element that I want to use. The reason I coloured the whole flower is partly because it's quite relaxing to do anyway, and partly because I wanted to give myself lots of options when I decided which element of the flower I wanted to use. At this stage I haven't decided if I'm going to use the stems, so I've left them in place. I'm going to take a piece of the purple glittery cardstock and I'm going to use the little hello die to cut out several little hellos. And even if I don't use them on this particular card, I'll use them on another card. I'm also going to cut out hellos from black and white cardstock. If you're batch making, it's a good idea to do all of these things at the same time. Then you're never short of an element to add to your card. I've assembled all the various pieces for my card. I've got a white hello, I've got a white card base, and I've got a blue card base which I've cut down using a die, but you could cut down using scissors. I've prepared my glue by cutting a little snippy top off the pointy part of the bottle and removing from the inside of the bottle the protective layer that stops all the glue flowing out. And now I'm going to glue on the reverse of my watercoloured image. That image will be glued down on the piece of blue card. And then I'll add some glue to the reverse of one of my white hellos that I cut out, and that will go in the top left corner. Anything that overhangs the blue card can simply be cut away with a pair of scissors. And finally I'm adding some glue to the reverse of my blue card, and I'm going to stick this down onto my white card. And we have a beautifully framed watercolour image with a friendly greeting. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can ink and emboss the block words that have come with the kit. In this first technique, I'm going to ink up the stamps. I've put them all onto one block for ease, and then I'm going to stamp them onto the black card. I'm going to use some white Wow embossing powder. I get through quite a lot, so I have a big tub. And I'm going to sprinkle this over the words, and then you'll be able to see where they've been stamped. Once I've sprinkled this and then got rid of the excess, I will heat set them. The words on these stamps have got such clear definition that we get a really sharp image. And the second way that I want to show you is by stamping the same stamps up with black ink and then covering them with a clear embossing powder. And I'm using an embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. You don't have to emboss these, but I think it gives a nice finish to the words. And here they are, all heat set and shiny, and ready to use on all of my upcoming projects. So let's move on to card 2. And I'm going to use a soft brown sepia coloured ink with the leaves and the long lines attached to them. I've cut down one of the pieces of card from the cardstock and I'm going to stamp onto one side of this piece of card. I'm going to turn my card around, I'm going to re-ink my stamp, and I'm going to stamp on the opposite side to where I first stamped. I'm only stamping up the lines, and I'm going to stamp these just to the left of my leaves on the left hand side of my card. This gives me a very obvious interruption in the lines, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to cover it over with an element as I complete my card. I'm going to take one of the watercolour pencils, this is the white one, and I'm just going to use it to colour in the leaves. I'm not going to add water to this. I have one of my white die cut hellos standing by, and it's going to go around about here, and it will cover off the obvious stop in the lines. I've got some glue and I'm going to add the glue to the back of my hand and I'm going to drop the die cut into it. This is a really good way of working if you find that the nozzle on your glue is just a little bit too large, and it means that you won't add glue where it's not needed and you won't end up with glue splurging out from underneath your sentiment. I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more dimension to my sentiment, so I've cut out a second hello in white card and I'm going to glue this down on top of the first. And maybe if I move the card, you can see how thick the sentiment is now. I'm returning to watercolouring for our third card, and I'm going to colour up this watercolour card using a mixture of yellows and oranges. I'm going to complete it by using water from my aqua pen. I'm going to cut this out. Only on the top half I'm going to leave whatever lies below the flowers intact. I cut down a piece of paper from the cardstock, and I also have prepared some of the sentiments that I stamped out and covered with the clear embossing powder. I'm going to add a line of glue across the back of my design. I'm going to glue it onto the paper. Next I'm going to wiggle about with those little sentiments, and when I'm happy with their position, I'll get my glue again and I'll stick them down. With everything glued, our card is complete. For our next card, I've got some black ink and I've chosen one of the sets of leaves from the stamp set. I'm going to stamp this onto some plain white card. Then I'm going to take a selection of green watercolour pens and I'm going to colour it and use my aqua pen to mix the colours using the water. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut out each of these small branches. I've cut down a piece of paper from the paper pack and I'm going to ink this up using a sentiment that says we are stronger together, and I'm just going to use plain black ink for this. I've got a piece of paper from the papers pack that matches the banner, and I've also cut down another piece of paper with the blue flowers on it. The banner will sit across both of these. And I've cut the banner down slightly so that it will fit inside the card. Now I'm going to play around with my leaves and decide exactly where I want them to be, and then I'm going to glue them into position. And our card is finished. For our next card, I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to take one of the stamps from the set, this time with a little flower on the top. I'm going to ink it up using plain black ink. I'm going to stamp it onto some white paper, and then I'm going to use the watercolour pencils and my aqua pen to colour it in. While that's drying, I'm going to take the reverse of one of the watercolour cards and I'm going to get a purple watercolour pencil and I'm going to use as much of the nib as I can to add colour to the reverse. The reason that I'm using this card is because it's nice and thick and it will take a nice amount of water before it buckles. I'm going to do a nice generous amount of pencil colouring on the back of this, and then I'm going to take my watercolour pen and I'm going to add water, and I want a smudgy effect around the outside of this. And while my background dries, I'm going to return to my coloured flower and I'm going to take my scissors again, I'm going to cut it out. And now that everything is dry, I'm ready to assemble the elements of my card. So I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of my flower, and I'm going to stick it in the center of the background that I've prepared. And next I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of a simple sentiment that just says love you, and I'm going to stick that right across the bottom of the stems, and our card is complete. For our sixth card, I wanted to do something a little bit sparkly, and I also wanted to use the lovely cutouts or the die cuts with the hello words. I've added some glue to the reverse of a piece of paper that I've cut from the card pack and which matches the piece of paper below. I'm going to stick it to the right hand side of this card. Next, I'm going to take the purple glittery strip that I've cut that you can see on the left hand side, and I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of that, and I'm going to stick it to the left of my patterned paper. I'm going to use my scissors to remove the little bits that overhang. I'm going to add glue to the back of my hand again, and I'm going to drop the die cut pieces into that before I glue them down onto my card. And it's just going to be a very simple card with the 3 of these hello die cuts stuck onto the front. If you have elements like this ready in your stash, you can pull together cards extremely quickly. I had to use the top of the paper pack paper, so I'm going to cut it free of all of the details below, and I'm going to use the top half. I've cut down a piece of the blue cardstock, and I'm going to add some glue to the top of this, and then I'm going to stick my pattern paper onto the top of it. Where it overhangs at the edges, I'll use my scissors to cut this away. I have a piece of twine, and I've cut it long enough so that I can run it around the back of my card and bring it to the front and tie a bow. But before I tie it off, I want to bring in an element that I've created. I've stamped this sentiment onto a piece of paper from the pack, and I've cut it down, and I've cut off the 2 top corners so it looks like a tag. And now I'm going to use my crocodile to add a hole in the top, and this is how I will thread it onto my twine. Now originally this card was conceived as being a horizontal card, but once I'd added the tag, I thought it would look better if it was vertical. You could actually do this card either way. What do you think? I've really enjoyed using these watercolour pencils, so my final card is going to be just that. I've stamped out a whole load of the branches with the leaves on them and some of the flowers. I've stamped these from the edge with the flowers and the points of the leaves heading in towards the centre of the card. And now I'm going to have a lovely time just colouring these in using a variety of greens. I'm using a light green and a dark green. For the flowers, I'm going to start at the bottom of each of the petals with a very light blue, and I'm going to use my aqua water pen to draw the colour up to the top of the petal. I'm going to complete my card with a hello that's been cut from black cardstock, and I'm also going to use some of the sentiments that I stamped up earlier and that I covered with the clear embossing powder. Once again, I'm going to use the trick of adding glue to the back of my hand to help me stick down my die cut hello, and then I'm going to use the same trick just to glue the reverse of my sentiments and get those stuck into place as well. And finally, I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of my design, and I'm going to stick it down onto a piece of the beautiful soft green cardstock from the kit, which I've cut down and which will give me a nice frame around the outside of my design. I'm going to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching as always. I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all of the cards that we've made today, along with a little music. And until we meet again, take care.